Okay, today we're going to start Unit 9.2, Graphing Inverses. As we go through this, make sure you guys are taking all the notes you need. If you need to stop the video, stop the video. That way we're making sure we get every instruction we need. Fill in the blanks along with your notes, take the examples, all that stuff. Make sure you get it all on there. That way you get the best understanding you can from this video. Alright, so let's go ahead and start. Yesterday we did finding inverses using algebraic method. Today we're going to graph our inverses and find our inverse through tables. So this is kind of the process that you guys are going to go through. You're going to generate a table of your original function. So on this example, they gave us a function of f of x is equal to 3x. When I created a table for that, as you guys can see in the example, I used easy numbers to compute. So we did like -2 and -1, 0, 1. Sorry, that's +2. And I just entered them in. So I take a -2, multiply it by a 3, I get my -6. -1 in there with 3 gives me -3. 0 gives me 0. You guys can see the pattern here. Okay, the way I create the inverse is I'm still switching my x and y just like I did with algebraic method. You just switch your variables. So in my new table for my inverse, I have my x and y. I'm going to put them in the table the same order. That way I'm used to the consistency. I'm just going to switch the values. So all my y values are going to come over here to be my x values on my new inverse. And I'm just going to move my x values now will become my y's. Okay, so that's how I created an inverse table using this. Now the next step in this is going to be to graph it. If I graph this, it's going to be graphed across what we're going to call as a reflection line, which is always going to be y is equal to x. And you'll see it on the graphs in the next slide in the blue ink here. So if I did a y equals x, you guys can see that right here it gives me a dotted line across the graph where y, if x is 1, y would be 1. If x is 2, y is 2. And it goes like that on forever, and that's our reflection line. So let's go ahead and set up our tables for this function. You guys kind of follow along here on your notes. So my first table that I'm going to do is for my original function that they give us here. Okay, so 1/2 x minus 4. If I use the same numbers as before, that's what I'm going to use to create my next table. Okay, so -2 goes in here, half of -2 is a -1, minus 4 gives me a -5. Put a -1 in for the x, that's going to give me a -1/2, minus a 4 is -4.5. The next one, put in a 0, just gives me a -4. You guys can see the pattern, it's going up by a half each time. So I get a -3.5 here, and a -3. That's my original function table. Now I'm going to create the inverse by giving my y values to my x, and then moving my x's to my y's. Okay, so you guys can see the pattern of this on how you're going to set it up. Now the next step we said was to graph it. So when we go into graph, you just do one table at a time. So I'm going to focus over here on the first one. I have a -2, -5. Then I have a -1 at 4.5. Then I have a 0 at -4. 1 at -3.5, and then my 2 is at -3. So my first line for my original function is going this direction. Okay, my next step is to do my second line. So I have a -5, -2. I have a -4.5 at -1. We're going to go in that direction. Now what you can notice here is our line should cross on that blue dotted line. That's showing a good reflection across that axis all the way through. So our lines will meet at the blue, okay, on this y equals x section here. Okay, so that's a way you can check yourself to make sure that you did your inverse correctly on the graph. Now, if you look at example number 2, now we're dealing with the quadratic. So we're going to have to focus on our parabolas. Parabolas are going to look a little different. They're going to be a little bit more confusing to look at when it comes to the table, but I'll explain it as we get to it here. So using the same numbers, these are going to be kind of our go-to numbers on these. I'm going to put in my -2 here, and it's going to give me a 0, because -2 squared is 4, minus 4 is 0. It'll give me the same down here. My 0 is going to give me a -4. -1 is going to give me a -3. And a +1 will do the same. You know, the square will always make it to a positive, negative. The same number is going to give you the same answer over here. So quadratic inverse, when we set this up, I'm just moving still. My y's over to my x's. That's a 0. And then move my x's to my y's. And then the big thing is going to be graphing these. These are going to be the most important part so you guys can see what it looks like. So starting over here with this one, I'm going to start with my vertex, which is going to be right here in the middle. And it's at 0, -4. And I'm going to just graph these points. My intercepts are at 2 and -2. So that's going to be my first parabola. My next one, I'm still going to start at what should be my vertex at -4 and 0. When I get to my -3, I'm at 1 and -1. So -3, -1, and 1. And then my zeros on my x will give me intercepts on my y at -2 and +2. This is my new parabola for the reflection. What you can see is if you look straight down the middle, going along this line, the y equals x line, okay, you can see that it cuts through and splits evenly the shape that you have between them. This point is equal distance to the blue line as this point. We're still crossing at 2 points on the y equals x. Your vertexes are equal distance, all of that. So you know that you set it up right. It's a perfect reflection off of the y equals x axis. Okay, so what you guys are going to do now, there isn't enough room on your notes page to do this problem, but what you guys are going to do, go through, I want you to solve this and make a table out of it using your -2 to +2, just like this. Do it on a separate sheet of paper and solve it out. Find the inverse and graph both of them, turn them in tomorrow at the beginning of class, and you guys will be all set. If you have any questions, make sure you're writing them down on the left side of your paper, and we're able to go through and answer those tomorrow so we have a good understanding of what's going on. I appreciate you guys' time. We'll see you later.